So, Phoenix Saga adaptation, take two. So the movie starts off with the X-Men. They're like flying off into space and they're saving some astronauts in distress. And while they're there, Jean Grey is out in the spaceship doing her thing, saving people. And then this big dark storm power cloud comes over her and she absorbs it into her body, survives. And that's kind of where we find ourselves. This thing is what we know as the Phoenix Force, but they don't explain it for the whole like first half of the movie. It's just like this cloud thing that we don't understand. They took way too long of a time to describe what the Phoenix Force was, and then at the point when they did, it's like if you asked me to recite what they just told me, it's just like, it's power. Unlimited power. So yeah, it's just like kind of boring. It's just like, oh, Jean doesn't know how to control herself anymore. Haven't seen it happen like this. Woo. So I'll say that I personally haven't read the Phoenix Saga comics, but I can really tell that they did not deliver on everything that that comic series brought, considering that it is the most well-renowned X-Men comic book series. It's just very unclear about what the Phoenix Force is to start, and then all that just like springs up so many more questions and plot holes behind it. And it's just like, why does the Phoenix Force make Jean lose control? You know, I understand that she's upset about some things, but it doesn't really explain why she can't control this thing inside of her, or like what the Phoenix Force, like its, you know, goal is, or what's its purpose. It's basically just described as a power cloud that is inside of her now. And, you know, it is powerful and it can be used to do powerful things. That's no way to describe something or make anyone care about it, especially considering that we're not necessarily attached to any of these X-Men characters since they're so new. A way that I thought that they could have totally changed this and made it so much better is if they totally removed Jessica Chastain's character, who you saw in like the trailers, and I won't really describe what she is because it's, I guess, kind of a spoiler. But I thought that it would be so much better if they replaced her character, because she's kind of a throwaway, and they made it more of a mental representation of the Phoenix inside of Jean. Maybe had some scenes where Jean's alone and she's like conversing with this Phoenix Force inside of her head, and it's just kind of like a back and forth, tempting her to do bad things that she's motivated to do. Dive deeper into this idea of the duality of man and kind of her trying to overcome this thing. A lot like in Spider-Man 2, if you'll remember, with like Doc Ock and how he is conversing with himself and kind of being tricked because of the arms that have fused to his body. That's like a great movie, and he was a great villain because you were able to dive into his thoughts. And I thought that they could have done that with Phoenix and it would have been a lot better, but I digress. Another big problem with this movie that I found was their portrayal of Professor X. And since X-Men First Class, when they recast Magneto and Professor X, they've shown them to be more youthful and how they're like forming themselves. But this is like the fourth movie with this James McAvoy playing Professor X. And I thought that at this point, you would have him kind of coming more into form with who he was in the comics and like the cartoons, of like being more of a wise counsel and like an outside leader of the X-Men. Like, he's not able to go out and fight, obviously, because he's crippled, but he's also like so wise because he can like read people's minds, and he's also able to know when not to use his power and give people freedom. It's just way more of a wise person that he should have been. But in this movie, they just kind of made him into a fool who is kind of wrapped up in his ego still and just like making really bad decisions. And I'm okay with you not making characters that aren't perfect. Like, those are interesting. You don't need to make him perfect. But I just thought that the character choices that they made with him just didn't really make sense to who he is. And yeah, like I said before, all the X-Men, save Beast, Jean, because she has a lot of screen time, in Magneto. Most of these characters are just like throwaways. They're not really characters. They just seem like stand-ins with superpowers. And they're just very forgettable, and it just doesn't make you feel involved in the story. There were some parts of this movie that I did like. I liked seeing Quicksilver, Nightcrawler, and especially Magneto using their powers. It's always fun to see superheroes using their powers, but, that's pretty much the one thing that I would say that I enjoyed in the movie. Magneto is always an interesting character because he and Professor X, have similar ideologies, but they just have very different ways of achieving them. But unfortunately, with that thought, Magneto and Professor X, they didn't really hit home on that relationship between them. And it has been done a lot in the other movies, but it is the most interesting part, and I just thought they underdelivered with that part of the movie. There were a lot of little parts where they are little seeds of feminism that you see, and it just doesn't fit at all. There's a part where Mystique is talking to Professor X. This isn't a spoiler, it's in a clip that they released, but she's complaining that the women are always saving the men in their fights, and she says it should be called X-Women, not X-Men. It's just where did that come from? That isn't even the issue that they're talking about at the moment. It just totally seems out of place, and it just seems like the writers just threw some stuff in there because it's the thing now, and it just also just doesn't make any sense because they're obviously equal. The men are getting just as much attention as the women are. And by the way, Dark Phoenix stars a woman, and I hope that it was really good, but unfortunately I have to be told in the movie that I'm a misogynist, just cause. It's didn't I just come in here and pay for a ticket to see this female-led movie and this X-Men team that's full of females, and I'm getting a lecture right now? It's just it's just kind of spitting in the eye of so many fans, men and women all together. Overall, I found myself in this movie kind of getting bored a lot, and there are blinks of nice things in the movie that you can enjoy and make it just watchable enough, but overall it's just not anything to write home about, and I'm going to give Dark Phoenix a 6 out of 10. So in all of my rankings of the X-Men movies, some of my favorites are obviously Logan, Days of Future Past, X-Men 2, and I would say Dark Phoenix falls in the number 9 slot of the 10 movies that they've released. It's slightly better than X-Men Origins Wolverine because that movie's a hot mess. But I would say that The Last Stand actually was a little bit better, although that movie gets so much hate. At least it had Hugh Jackman and likable characters that had compelling, drives for what they were doing. Dark Phoenix is lacking in those areas. It does have the normal superhero things in it, but I say it falls behind The Last Stand. Well, anyways, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, press like. If you want to leave a comment below, have a conversation, leave a comment below. Subscribe, hit the notification button to see all of my new content. I'm releasing so much more very soon. And my name is Jared Gilster, and I'll see you next time.